Testing, testing. Okay. Getting everything set up. Hopefully this is all working. Oh, there we go. Oh, good. What's up, Dindo? I opened up the stream for the chat and heard my own voice, so off to a good start. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Giving people some time to load in. Yeah, we got notice after I'm gonna show up on cam with my stupid green screen. But I'm moving on Wednesday, so things are a mess behind me. So let's see. I got the yeah, you can kind of see it here. Final best of set to ever exist. So 5 in a row, not too shabby. There we go. It kind of works. Woo. Update background to Rockfall Path. Suppose I could. Maybe that'll be like a chat votes for what my background becomes at some point. I've kept it as Dreaming Tree forever, just because I like the artwork, but what's up, Mr. Stout? Everyone wants a new background, huh? Just because my card is banned. What's a good background we could do? We could do could we do Kingpin's art? Probably wouldn't work super well. Maybe like some splash arts or something. I don't know. Y'all tell me what you want me to turn it into. Maybe we'll have a stream of with me with a different background. Should be Valley of Idols. I think Monastery of Harana is like probably my most iconic valley. You know? Harana Riftbound. There we go. Always change it to the monastery. What battlefield do you want to go to? That's the question. To be fair, when Alex ranted about Rockfall Path being dog water, that was before the ambush mechanic existed. And then they printed the ambush mechanic, so it very quickly became not dog water. Arena bar background, buff token background. Oh, the arena bar is a good one. And so many options. Even make sure my video broadcast is gonna let me change this easily. Okay. Let's see. We can do some options. See, if it's not a battlefield, it doesn't look like it has just the art clipped. So maybe it's gonna be only battlefields. Do not. Where did I save this? I see. It's probably just because this is like an actual league thing. Well, that'll have to be a problem for future me. For some reason, it's not working, but It was nice meeting you too, DHV. Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, it was honestly this weekend was really cool. I signed so many cards, took so many photos. People were super kind this weekend, so it's nice, especially for like the last one that we have for at least a little bit, right? I think our next one is what do we actually have? Looks like Barcelona's mid-August. So we got a little bit of time. But yeah, I wanted to go over some of this info as people are kind of loading in. See what ended up happening. Obviously, we have our goat Priz making another top 8. Alright, let's pop this out. I'm gonna get good and off meta legend. Should go with Kha'Zix or Jax. It's kind of hard to say, so that's one of the things we'll have to go over now, just because technically all of these legends are like, it's going to be a completely different meta, right? At least for the next RQ. Let's see, so this was best of sorted by win percentage, I suppose, or maybe it was done by play rate, right? And the best of obviously factor winning the event, having a pretty high win rate, pretty nice. Let's see decks. There we go. We can go through some of the old spreadsheets. I don't think we have one of the current ones, but let's see what we have here. So let's see. I have Utrecht. Usually this is okay. This is like the actual. Let's go to the spreadsheet. So looking at Kha'Zix's matchup, Kha'Zix was one of like the better anti-meta picks just in general. Its only bad matchup of the meta decks really is PGE, but it actually has like a pretty decent Aurelia, Diana, good LeBlanc matchup, but it struggles into some of like the random off-meta stuff. Apparently bad into Rengar, bad into Victor. Has 0 and 12 into Ezreal, so unwinnable into Ezreal apparently. I could see Lux combo being a bit of a problem. Rek'Sai, any sort of like hyper aggressive deck that can just kind of get under it is going to be an issue for Kha'Zix. It's just kind of a tempo deck that's really reliant on all the bounce spells and such, so anything that's able to deal with that is going to be a problem. I think for the Master Yi matchup, it kind of struggles in the Camel. Thoughts on people on best of Rumble winning step by step? Yeah, that's I mean, something we can go over, I suppose, when it comes to people's specific runs. I know that was one of the memes of the weekend. I don't know if it was entirely true, but I did see the guy just because he was like just in front of me in the best of line, being Rumble and Set, and he was like he seemed very confused to be there, which was very funny. Yeah. So yeah, I think Kha'Zix is a very good deck. It's just kind of anti-meta, so I could see it performing particularly well at like local levels and stuff, where people are more likely to play some of the meta decks. Am I still going to play Set since he's isn't a best of chase? No. There's no best of, then unfortunately I will not play the legend. I mean, he overall does have like good matchup spreads into a lot of stuff. I didn't feel like terrible into any of the top decks. as you can kind of see based on the aggregate win percentage. Granted, this is a little bit skewed because I play this deck, but and it's like a pretty low play rate deck overall. So, um, yeah, that's how it goes. So, but yeah, I think it's still it was a decent deck. I'm glad I was able to send it home with a win. Getting all 5 in a row was really nice. Once I committed to it, I just got the monopoly on them. So we'll have to see what the next legend is that I decide to do that with. So the more frequent streams, yeah, we're trying to do this more regularly. So Antim will be doing our Wednesday stream this week, just because I am out of town, or I'm moving back home rather. That was kind of one of my big things. I finished at finished up with Hartford, came back, landed maybe 3 hours ago. Took like a tiny nap, and yeah, now I'm here. And then do some work tomorrow, and then drive back home on Wednesday. So then after that, hopefully I'll have a lot more time to do content and all that sort of stuff. So what was the best aggro deck? That's interesting. I think the of like the most, yeah, I guess if we're talking about just in terms of results, and he's probably up there. Rengar's had decent results as well. We had a 10-1-2 Rengar getting best of, I guess. Okay, I see. 10-1-1 and just ended up taking the ID to guarantee it in the last round. Yeah, I was gonna say Rengar ends up actually having pretty decent results as well. So I think Annie is probably a little bit stronger. But you know, Rek'Sai's had some decent results here as well. If we're just talking about in terms of um, all that sort of stuff. So I mean, this guy was able to go 11-2. Not sure what his see what his actual run was. So Kai'Sa, Aurelia, Diana, lost to a Yi, lost to a LeBlanc. He played against the Ivern. This guy was crazy. That was one of the more interesting stories. Is there were two legends. I don't remember what the other one was that just were like otherwise terrible legends. This guy, yeah, this guy started out 6-0 on Ivern. He had to buy. Then yeah, played into I guess Annie, Leona, Victor, Draven. Beating a Draven is crazy. 2-0 to Draven even. Wild. And then beat our friend on Pike just because this matchup's actually probably terrible for any of like the control decks. Just based on what it does, it just makes a bunch of tokens with deflect. And then, you know, after starting 6-0, he you know, lost 5 of the next 6, but very, very funny. Yeah, appreciate the Prime sub, Panther. The Google spreadsheet's all in our Discord. One of our community made things, but this is an old one. We don't have the one for Hartford. So probably just end up using Yomi's for this stream to kind of take a look at some of the stuff. So my run was also, I guess I can go over it just because it was a little disappointing. To a degree. I was the only day 2 set, which was like a relief. I ended up 7-1 on day 1, and ended up, yeah, the only day 2 set. So I was just kind of free rolling into day 2. I obviously wanted another top on the deck if I could have, but I think I ended up starting out really strong. I 2-0'd my first 4 matchups going into Rek'Sai, MF, LeBlanc, and another Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai is like a really good matchup for us just because it's an aggressive deck. We're very good at holding. The MF in round 3, just, you know, my deck's actually pretty good into Aurora decks for whatever reason. Just historically, it's just kind of how the deck works. That when you have 3 Sabos, 2 Ashes, and 2 Auctions, then Aurora's not going to be a bad matchup. I personally hate going into the matchup because it is kind of low agency. It's very reliant on you finding your key cards. You need to find your sabotages, you need to find your auroras, you need to find your auctions, so on and so forth. So, but when you're able to, I think this game 1, you just ended up not drawing an aurora quick enough, And then game two, I had access to 3 Sabos, 2 Ashes, and 2 Auctions. So I think he drew the Aurora, and I ended up ashing it, and that was all it wrote. So um, yeah, after that, round six was against a Misfortune, where game one I ended in like a minute. I conceded on turn three. My opponent won the die roll, went Mobilize into Catalyst, gusted my unit before I could even touch the battlefield. I saboed, hit an Aurora, and then they had like nothing in hand because they had already played Mobilize, Catalyst, Gust, and I took an Aurora, and then just flipped off the top another Aurora. Um, Hit me with a classic "I'm so sorry," which was very very funny. It was like I got PTSD flashbacks from the Squirtle match, where it's just like I sabo you, and then you just hit it off the top. Okay, what can you do, right? But then I won games two and three. Game two was kind of a blowout. I just was on the play and was able to have a very aggressive line. He did end up having a gust, and I had like a turn one play into a turn two unit plus showstopper, and was just 2-4-6-8'd with some hand disruption backup. And then game two was kind of interesting, or game three was kind of interesting, where I didn't end up. He actually resolved the Aurora, but I had access to double Auction, and his Aurora flipped into a Baron, which was a little bad for me. And it played out in some weird way where it was on my Valley of Idols game, so I had to trade one of my Auctions into the Baron because it was the only way that I could kill it, give him back his Aurora, because I knew that he had a Elder Dragon in play, and my Auction wasn't buffed at the time. He had already broken the buff with a challenge. So I had to kill my own Auction, give it back to him, and then I played the second Auction onto the Valley of Idols because it's the only way I could provide a buff in order to play around the Elder Dragon that I knew he had in hand. Otherwise, I was just going to get back the Aurora, flip a second unit, and I probably would have died. And then, yeah, after that, he used like the MF plus the Elder Dragon to get onto a battlefield, but I had a buffed Ash, which I punch firsted, sent in. He flurried to trade it off, and then I was able to showstopper the Ash back in and trade for the Elder Dragon, and that was all that I needed to win the game. So, I was like one of the more interactive games versus Aurora, so very cool match, very memorable. After that, I ended up losing to an Azir. I made like one pretty grave error that this match definitely costed me the game. This was kind of the only match that I think mathematically I kind of punted, and I just didn't realize an interaction, just because it hadn't really come up for me. So this was one that definitely was winnable had I practiced a bit more, but I ended up playing the Vi into a Hidden Blade and not realizing that Vi required you to stun something here, so he killed it in response to the trigger, and I didn't get the stun, which ended up I almost ended up winning the game. I got him empty-handed, and he just had a one turn to top deck and out, and he did. So super unfortunate match, definitely winnable. Had I played around that Hidden Blade a little bit better, in theory, it's possible that he would have just like never not flipped. I ended up sending like 9 might into 9 might while he had the Hidden Blade. And it's possible he wouldn't have flipped it had I not played the Vi, and then I probably still would have been in a losing position. So not necessarily a toss, but yeah, that was just super unfortunate. And then I 2-0'd Dawn in the last round, who's a good friend of ours. So ended up 7-1 on day one. Actually ended up winning the next two matchups. One to a LeBlanc Hook player, where it was a really close match, but I was able to eke it out in the end. I top deck like a showstopper. I needed like a showstopper or a first mate or a punch first or a call to glory, something like that in order to break over it. Unfortunately, I got the showstopper, so was enough to bring that one home. Then I beat a E after that to go 9-1. Then unfortunately, I ended up losing to Duval in a very close match. I didn't really understand what his deck was doing enough. So otherwise, I think this was potentially winnable. The only line that like I remember that I kind of made a mistake was I ended up sacrificing my Cytherea kind of for free, because he had a set card, and I was trying to play around like Tide Turner by getting the additional might in there, but I realistically probably shouldn't have, because it ended up being Switcheroo, which I played around Switcheroo as well. So that was one of the cards that I assumed it would be. But then ended up just like losing my Cytherea for free, which ended up the game was like so close that just the one extra body would have won me the game. So that was super unfortunate that I kind of made it, but it was just like a very slight mistake that I should have known better, and costed me the match. So that unfortunately knocked me out of contention. Um, I then played against another Master Yi who was actually kind of a friend from back in Orlando. So super nice guy, who played pretty well. Kind of new to card games, but obviously a gamer who knows how to play the game well enough. And I got to a point where I set up a board. And the final game three, game two, game one, I rolled him. Game two, he rolled me on the arena's greatest. My hand was complete brick. Game three was potentially winnable. I didn't really remember any spots that I made an active mistake, but it came down to a point where I just walled up both sides, and he had one draw step to draw. He had to draw exactly either punch first or charm, and he had already played two charms, but he had his draw step. He was just like, all right, I'm gonna flip it off the top. We know what we need, just because we were kind of friendly throughout the match and shooting the shit. So he just flipped it onto the table, and it was the third charm for exactly lethal. So yeah, unfortunately lost that one. And then the last round was against Rek'Sai, who I didn't need the invite, and he did, so I just gave him the win because I've already got like 5 or 6 invites. So seemed like a cool guy who just wanted his invite. So and yeah, obviously I already had my best up at that point. So yeah, that was my whole tournament run. Um, Definitely could have done a little bit better. I think both of my first matches were theoretically winnable, which is a little disappointing, but just a couple of like very slight mistakes that ended up costing me. So, um, but yeah, so that was most of my tournament recap. Obviously, one of the benefits of Riftbound is the best of is really all that we're playing for. Even from my top four of Utrecht, I ended up getting like I think 2K in cash, and then a top eight playmat is the only actual difference. So um, yeah, just one of those reasons why I've been playing for best ofs is like in terms of pricing, this me going 9-4 feels the exact same as me going like 12-2-1, only losing to two people who combined had four RQ wins. Like it feels the exact same in terms of pricing. So that part's nice. So that's why I don't really know what my intention will be moving forward. If I want to play for a win or if I want to just play for another best of, I'll kind of have to see. I do kind of want to prove myself that I think I'm a good enough player to be able to win some of these things. If I do find a deck that I think is a little underrepresented or underappreciated, or maybe I'll even just play the best deck similar to, Alan or Diwali, who have at least had decent results on it, right? So, yeah. But that's my tournament recap. Let me try and catch up on chat a little bit. Let's see. Did Mira equip the axe a lot against you? He had some controversy about that. I don't. Did he have an axe in his list? I don't know if there are deck lists here. I don't know what the axe is, but I did not end up losing. He never played an axe against me. I don't think he had an axe in his deck list. Oh, they don't have it here. Maybe they have it here. Oh, he did have Battle Axe in his list. Interesting. Yeah, his list was kind of cool. Um, yeah, I just the game one was super close. It came down to a last. I had him dead on board, one draw step to find something, and he just top decked a Falling Star to kill my set. I was like, okay, well, unlucky. Um, so, but I had drawn pretty well to even get to that point too. So I was drawing some heaters on him too. So, but yeah, the one felt pretty sad. So, um, yeah, my draw was like super weird. I drew three sabos as like my first three draw steps. It was a very weird game. But obviously Duvall is a goat, so the Bandai goat. So I did not feel bad losing to Duvall. Plus he's a homie. So are you gonna continue with Set moving forward? Yeah, my intention with Set is I do think it is like my pet deck and kind of my trademark at this point. So if there's a reason for me to play Set, I will. But without the best of pricing, I'm just better off playing for something else. If for some reason they do like some alternate pricing that ends up being really good for the Set One Legends and still having some sort of best of thing that's worth something, then maybe I'll still consider it. But without the best of pricing, yeah, I have no intention of playing Set for any longer, unfortunately. Outside of like maybe at a local level or bringing it to skirmishes for old time's sake. So I've got my deck box in here. I don't know what I'm gonna do with the current list, but because it's basically been the same list a few times, I'm gonna maybe like frame it or something like that. I think it would be really cool. Some way to commemorate it, you know. Let's see. Okay. Can try and get through some questions. In terms of playstyle, what would be the closest set within Spirit Forged and Unleashed? I don't know if there's anything that's exactly like it. That's kind of my issue. Moving forward is that it's like built around the idea of like these combat tricks and being you're like a hybrid between a hold deck and a aggressive deck, right? You can just kind of play to whatever your strengths may be. So I like the ability to hold, which honestly limits the amount of decks that are available. I would say of the current decks that exist, what the closest is probably Master Yi, which is unfortunate because this deck is also rotating out, just because it's a deck focused around combat tricks and making math difficult for your opponent. Um, while also having access to Zonias, which is just my legend ability. It's basically I'm getting a free Call to Glory every turn instead of a Zonias, and then I have to play the Zonias from hand, as opposed to in Set where I have a free Zonias every turn and I'm playing the Call to Glory from hand. So, um, yeah, we'll see what the new legends end up being. Maybe there'll be a new one in the same color combination that will be good. But honestly, it's mostly the legend ability is what I was abusing out of Set. So I don't know if it will really translate as well for me. If like the new legends, like I think Ambesa's coming out, and that feels like it could be Set colors, but we'll have to see. Or I guess Renekton, I think is another one. No, that guy has to be Fury, right? Literally, his mechanic in League of Legends is Fury. So um, really, you don't have to tell us. Are you scrimming with any legends that might be your potential OTB? One thing I will tell people is that I want people to know what legend I'm playing because at this event, I don't know if people saw, but the actual breakdown. But there were, let's see if there's actual numbers here. This is the top participation. Here we go. So if we go all the way over here, Set was actually the fifth least represented deck. And I had multiple people coming up to me and saying that I wanted to play Set, but I know there's no point because you're here and playing it. So I had the same representation as Garen or Darius, which is crazy, right? So I want people to know what I'm playing. And also as a part of being like a content creator and all that sort of stuff, I'm going to be very open with what it is that I'm playing. I don't particularly mind. Part of I lose a little bit out on the competitive side, but yeah, I do think I get a lot of benefits from just being open with people and being like, yeah, you can contest me on a legend if you want. Just know that you're not going to get the best of. So, um, yes, I see a couple people asking about the Diana deck list, so I will get to those in a second um, once I get there. Did you talk about Arena's greatest trigger sharking? I mean, as part of the game, they've changed the rules as well so that like you literally have an entire turn to catch the Arena's greatest trigger. But if you get to a point where you're passing your opponent and then they remember the trigger and you don't, like, I mean, there are tons of people who have just like accepted to not that they're not getting the trigger, right? Alan was like one of the most famous ones from Set 1 who just missed his trigger and it was like, yeah, I didn't argue with it. None of that. And part of that too is most people will, with Arena's Greatest, just be like, gentlemen's, do you want to start at 1-1? And yeah, that's just something that you can do. So if you don't want to shark people, then you can say that. in the first place. So, but I don't know the entire story. It's just part of the game. I'm of the opinion that whatever happens within the game, like we're playing for large amounts of money here. Um, if you miss a trigger, that's on you. I'm not the type that's just gonna be like, oh yeah, you missed your beneficial trigger. That's not on me. Why do you play more Ringar than Vine set? Is the one might that much more valuable than the stun effect for the same cost? It's more so that I want to maximize my ability to go turn one arena bar into turn two Rengar, and my deck doesn't really have a ton of things in the back that I can use to access Vi sometimes, just because I'm often holding with a lot of stuff. So if I need to get to the other side, it can be a problem. So deck. Um, so yeah, it's possible that this combination could have been different, or I could have had like an extra Vi, or I could have gone 2-2. This is just what my gut told me was good. There's some cards that underperformed. Hidden Blade did end up winning me a couple games this time around, so it was bad all traditionally, but ended up not being too bad here. So if I wanted to play more Vi's, I would consider going for a variation that had like Kinko Initiates and stuff like that, just to have extra random bodies around to abuse Vi a little bit more. You could like maybe shave an Arena Bar and like the Hidden Blade. You maybe move a Sabbath to the board, get some Kinko Initiates in here, get some extra copies of Vi, and play it that way. But yeah, I don't know. I just got to a point with this list where it was good enough to get me as far as it did, so I didn't want to really mess with the Juju anymore once I got to this point, right? I've been playing competitive TCGs for, at least on the competitive side, for about 10 years, but I've been playing TCGs for about 18 plus. And I mean, I guess technically I competed in the GP in 2013 and got top 32 once upon a time. That was, yeah, so 13 years ago, I guess, suppose. Um, yeah, he wanted to bring you set in Utrecht, but yeah, that's how it goes. So that's why, like I said, I'll be open and honest with people, especially my fans, the people that are watching back home. I will make sure that you do not have to play the same legends as me if you do not want to. So, um, you got hit with the I'm sorry against the victor that back to back cold me. Yeah, it's again, it's card games. This game is one that just has stuff like that happen. So, yeah. So let's see, my friends split the best of Azir. That's sick. That's cool. I know that the Azirs are kind of in a weird spot just because Squirtle has two, and then you have Rocklow that has like four, right? So I guess neither of them were here though, so it was an open fight for the Azirs. So oh, this is the guy that I lost to. So yeah, didn't even realize he ended up getting the best of set. So good for him. He was a good dude. So. How do you actually register for these regional qualifiers? I've been trying to sign up, but I have no idea how to. It's all done through Eventbrite, so on the official website, they post the dates for when the tickets will go live. And you just end up going onto Eventbrite, and you just have to be there at whatever time they go live. They end up being, I think, noon local time for whatever the day is that's announced. So for Barcelona, you'll have to convert it into whatever the local time is. So unfortunately for those in the US, it ends up being like 4 or 5 a.m. Sometimes that you have to get up early to buy those tickets, but then I just do that and ended up falling asleep afterwards. So, yeah, XP and Jax, yeah. The issue is I'm not going to play like a completely terrible legend. So unfortunately, since Jax got the errata, that deck is no longer very good, and XP has always kind of been a meme. Although I think Vero ended up starting out pretty hot. Although I don't think he actually did he get the I don't think he actually got the E. Yeah, he didn't. So um yeah. I don't know what Vero's tag is. What happened here? Oh, Vero. Interesting. He went just dropped after. Yeah, he started out 6-0 as well. He was the other one that did well and then lost two in a row. I guess lost the third one and then dropped, which is a little weird. I'm guessing he just didn't want to end up playing anymore. So, or maybe they ended up taking a chop. That's probably the more likely thing. So, or that nobody wants to challenge me. Yeah. Aurelia be close? I think Aurelia could theoretically be close, so it's something that I've considered as well. My issue with Aurelia is she's like so reliant on seeing the Stellacorn herder. I don't like decks that are linear, I guess. I want to be able to like adapt my playstyle a lot more. So if I could find an Aurelia list that isn't as reliant on seeing the herder, then I would be open to Aurelia as well. Especially because she's a cool best of to have, right? So um, yeah. Um, Yeah, yeah, it helps that my list is also or my deck isn't like the best because we've seen despite Priz winning 6 Annies, like people still end up contesting him on Annie a decent amount um, for whatever reason. So, but that's just because that deck's like actually not bad, and there's some there are 38 people that ended up on Annie. But yeah, I think most people know there's not really a reason to play Annie unless you. It's just, but it's like actually a good deck. So there are plenty of people that have got their top 64 with Annie as well. I know that uh, Vancouver was one that I think Priz ended up getting in the end, but there were like four people at the same record. So um, one went away from day two with Ari. Yeah, that's gotta sting, especially knowing what that Ari sold for. But um, Sam said never playing Ringer again and then did it. Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing that you'll find about players is that like sometimes we'll have that emotional response playing a deck list and be like, "Oh, I never want to play this again just cuz it did so poorly." Yeah, he ended up going 10-3 here unfortunately. Actually with a pretty good OMW, so maybe with a better record he could have gotten there. But yeah, unfortunate. But yeah, this one of those things. What can you do? The deck list is actually obviously pretty good, just based on its stats. So, um, yeah. I think there's any power in the blue LeBlanc deck. I'm trying to build one that uses blue buff and the big boys. Atacon, Herald Dragon. Atacon, Herald Dragon with 3 tactical retreats. Interesting. Well, tactical retreat doesn't work with Hook is one of the big things. Um, Most of those lists just end up being greedy. My take whenever I build a list is that like it has to be better than the other alternatives, right? Or have some better matchups. So the issue with like the big LeBlanc lists and the reason why LeBlanc hasn't been at the top of the meta is just because it has a really bad Diana matchup. Actually has a pretty good matchup into the rest of the field, right? But its Diana matchup is like kind of impossible, and Aurelia can be a struggle too. But you do actually have like a good Yi matchup and good matchup into a lot of other random stuff. Annie as well is really bad, so that's what's really holding LeBlanc back. So if you want to like innovate on that list, you have to find some way to improve those matchups for it to theoretically be better, right? Um, we don't actually have a Google Doc for Hartford yet, unfortunately. So Manch is out, so he hasn't actually made it. So I'm just using the Yomi's information here as our stuff. So I know a couple people have been asking about the Dyna list, so I will definitely get to that as soon as I catch up on questions. Yeah, Vero split the best of. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh. Yeah, no worries. It's always nice signing cards, and I'm glad that your wife ended up liking it. Why not play Fiora? The issue that I run into is that, like, while they're in the same color combination and playing the same cards, more or less, the decks just don't play very similarly at all, in my opinion. So, Fiora has, well, outside of just being like a terrible deck, I mean, I think most of the time these end up being um, Aurora decks too, right? And yeah, and just this deck just does not perform. So uh, yeah, so much random stuff for 6 rounds. And see the common decks until day two. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much a common thing that I mentioned for a lot of people is like whatever your tournament run is for the most part, unless you get really unlucky. Like this guy got pretty unlucky playing against. I got 4 Ys in the first 6 rounds, including a bye. So 4 Ys and a Ringar was this guy's bracket. Um, like you're typically gonna have kind of random stuff for the first 6 rounds. Then once you get to like the 5-0, 6-0 range, that's when you'll actually start playing against all the meta stuff. But if you go into the majority of people's runs, right, you can see. So this guy got like a round 2 bye, played against like Irelia. So this guy actually had a pretty like this guy played against all meta, which is crazy. So um, it does happen too. You don't always have the most control over it, but um, yeah, Azir, Jinx, Diana LeBlanc, Sivir, Diana. Yeah, so some people do end up having unfortunate runs, but you just kind of have to predict everything that can end up happening. You know, this guy played against 2 Lilias. Like, who's preparing themselves to play against 2 Lilias? If somebody else got this bracket, right? Um, no, I think I'm gonna get into these deck lists now. Anything with greater meta shift? Do the removal of the Origins PG shift. I mean, we might see people still playing decks like E because I know there are a lot of people who just really want their invites, especially as we're getting towards the FOMO era, with these next 3 regionals being the last time for people to get their invites. Um, so yeah, we'll see. If EPG is still very good, then I could see people still playing it even without a best of pricing, just because there are a lot of people I've talked to who are just like, yeah, I just want to compete and play what I think the best deck is. Obviously, given its absurd win rate. I'm glad that this deck is gone. It definitely way over converted and was way too broken a deck thanks to cards like Rengar. So um, 5-up had a neat Vex. Yeah. Well, we can get into some of the deck lists now. Um, see where things ended up. So I think the one that people were mentioning that they wanted to see the most was this Diana list because I do think it was. I heard a little bit of it because Trevor ended up losing to it, so he told me about the Rift X. Is this not the URL? What's happening? Yeah, Bloody's a friend of mine, so she had a really cool list. Apparently worked with Ali, and Ali was a little harder on himself. I think he still made day 2, but he ended up punting both the matches that he lost, I believe he said. So, which happens when you're playing like a new list that you just kind of cooked up, right? So, I think that was unfortunate nature for them that they didn't get as much practice. Okay, well, sort of another Rift Dex esque of it thing. I don't know if they've officially posted any of this. No, they have not. Perfect. Yeah, site's down. Well, I would love to check out some of these top lists, but I unfortunately cannot. Will it pop up if I go into here? I went over my run earlier, but I had a couple of matches I made some very slight mistakes against that costed me, which happens when you're playing off meta, right? Any sort of little mistake will cost you. So, when does the ban list get updated? They don't have like a set release for ban list stuff in this game, so it's just when they feel like they need to ban something, which they got through all of their events without banning anything for Yi, even though I think that they probably need to ban something from this deck, but so we'll see. Especially at a local level, I'm sure this Yi list will probably continue to crush while it's still legal. And for anything that doesn't have best of pricing, like yeah, Yi is I'm sure going to still be very broken come set 4. People probably posted them in the Piltover archive. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe I can find them there. Now people said they want to see the Diana list. There we go. I was told that he made an unfortunate, or someone said that maybe he punted a game in the finals, which would be sad to hear if true, but the best of Jin, and I think I saw it on Twitter. I think I saw the is like some Gutter Palace time warp nonsense, which I mean, if you're playing a bad legend, then sometimes you got to cheese and hope for the best. So the Yummy site took the list off just for Hartford for some reason. Oh, interesting. Well, we can see what we can find on Piltover Archive to do some analysis. So I did hear about this, the Arena's Greatest Dianas list. I'm assuming this is probably for like Aurora, maybe. And I mean, just going first, like one thing about this game is like while Targon's is obviously very strong for Diana, it's one of those things that like if your deck is built properly, it's gonna win going first anyways, right? So if you're in a position where you like need to get a little bit of extra percentage points in a decks like Aurora on that going first game, then maybe playing an Arena's Greatest can help you out there. And if you're gonna win the going first games anyways, then like it doesn't matter as much. You don't like have to maximize your percentages into everything. So yeah, I do think Arena's Greatest is very broken, just because fundamentally when you're able to make the game go a little bit shorter, but you're going first, then you're just going to have that much of an advantage over your opponent. Like, think of it in this way. Like, if a game goes 20 turns, right, and you go first, whereas your opponent went second, you only have you have 5% more turns than your opponent. Whereas if a game goes like 5 turns and your opponent goes 4, then you have 20% more turns than your opponent. So mathematically, anytime going first, you can make the game go faster than it's going to be to your benefit. Kind of deck box. So we took a heavy play sponsor at one point. So I've been using their stuff, but it is very expensive, and we aren't currently sponsored by them. So that's my current deck box. But I've honestly like some of my favorites are just like these little anime. This is like an old deck box that's like falling apart. I probably need to like glue it together or something to put it back together. But I love these just like random anime deck boxes. This is the deck box that I have like my best of set in and all that sort of stuff. There's a bunch of random metal cards and stuff in here too. So I keep it pretty simple when it comes to deck boxes. Is the first significant win for you? Yeah, I mean, I think that's also been there's a thing where it's like if the best players aren't playing the list, then especially in a game that's as skill intensive as Riftbound, then it's not going to ever end up winning, right? Once we get to the highest level, people are going to be prepared for that style of deck. But eventually it will just get people. So yeah, this is a very interesting list with only 2 Hueys, 2 Moonfalls, which this list is built in a different way. This is like a very much so an aggro Diana list. Yeah, that's what Trevor said, that the guy had main deck hard bargains plus sprite fountains. So very difficult. I don't know what's out of the sideboard. I think he said that maybe there was an abandon, or maybe it was the other Dinah that was in top that he ended up playing against, that had the main deck abandoned. So yeah, I'm a wee bit heart, so I got this deck box. I've had this deck box for like 15 plus years, so it was a gift from a friend, so I've used it ever since. So, but yeah, not playing 3 Hueys is kind of interesting, but yeah, this deck it's like you have to think of this deck as a very different style of deck. He's just abusing the combat tricks that Diana has access to, and I kind of say it pretty often where with how this deck is built, you all of your spells like Moonfalls and Eclipses and Rebukes and Starcross, like these will win combat for you no matter how big your unit is, right? So you don't always need to be Giga reliant on Hue, and I think if you're playing low to the ground like this, it gives you more agency into like singularity decks and such. So maybe that was kind of what they were dealing, or what his specific mentality was. But I could see this being slightly worse into decks like E, just because you don't quite have the top end to to continually push through a deck like E. Um, Ultimate Guard Sidewinder, yes. I shout out to Ultimate Guard. They're one of my favorite gaming companies, so one that I would definitely recommend for people if they're looking for stuff. So, mentioned deck doctoring. Potentially, we can get to it if we have some time and there's things that people want to look at. It's something that I want to do for kind of moving into set four is like talk a lot more about how deck building works as somebody who's built my own unique list and performed well with it. Not many people have been able to do that, right? I want to at least show like my math and thought process and how I come up with these deck ideas that do end up being unique and suited to my specific playstyle. So that is something I want to do for sure as spoiler season ends up coming around. Currently, I have element sleeves, but I'll probably swap into katanas or some of my favorites. So, oh, Trevor played the other Diana. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Don't know if Hartford number 4. Okay. I see, yeah. The abandon plus the hard bargains is kind of tough for the list for sure. This is definitely a much more traditional style of Diana though, with the random eager apprentice. Weird. Um, Trying to build a hidden pike Katarina deck and make it viable. That was what Cody actually ended up playing for Jinx. I think unfortunately ended up going 5-3, where I think all the Jinx are like 5-3 to 5-2-1 this time around. So he was really close, and he said he made a couple of mistakes. So yeah, I think hidden stuff works a lot better out of even Jinx, as weird as that sounds. Yeah, we don't have deck lists here, but oh yeah, he ended up going 4-4. So he said he punted a couple of these matchups, so it's definitely theoretically viable, but it's never going to be like top tier playing something as weird as that. So, this was my first top 8. That's nice. Lost some winning in top 8 in Atlanta and SCG 10K back. Yeah. The unofficial events, I think they're still pretty competitive. You still have like good players that are playing in them. They're obviously a little bit easier just because you don't have to play as many rounds, but I think the level of player isn't that much higher at the RQ level than it is even at some of these unofficial events. It definitely is a little bit, but that's again just because you have more rounds that you have to play at the high records. So yeah. So I think both these Diana lists are cool. Someone was asking how I would build Diana. And honestly I'm not really sure. Both of these decks just probably have completely different matchup spreads. Like on the aggressive side, you're going to be a little bit better into decks like Aurora, into the Lux Infinite decks. Anything a little bit slower, you'll be better into Singularity decks as well because we're on 3 Purple Vex and such. But you're going to be worse in a decks like E, I think, just because we don't quite have as much top end with the extra Hoys and stuff. But realistically, you could create like a transformational sideboard and swap between both of these variations just based on what you think the best way to try and win the game is, right? So, Diana's not a list that I personally have invested too much time into, so I can't say for sure, but I'll always go with whatever Diwali says. He's my goat. Do regionals allow double sleeves? Yeah, you can double or triple sleeves if that's what you want to do. So. Let's my chat like this. There we go. Yeah, the Eager Apprentice. I mean, it was good enough to get him to this far, so I'm sure there was some reason behind it. I don't think it's one that I personally approve, but people will just play random stuff. This is kind of one of those things where I say that like if you just like something and it performs well for you in testing, it's not going to drastically change your percentage points to just have a random card like this in here. You know what the legend is? Yep, I'm committed to try the for Body Mind in LA. Yeah. hopefully we'll have spoilers. I think they got pushed back a little bit, right? So they're starting here in a couple of weeks, and then we'll have a little bit more information as to what I'll be playing, just because I know a lot of people are asking. But I would love to play a Kali. I know Anton also said that he wants to play a Kali, so might be some contention there, but I think that she'll probably be pretty good. So, if she ends up being one of the better decks, then maybe we'll see both of us on it. Abandon is an extremely good in Deluxe combo. Um, no, I would never cut Stella out of Aurelia. To be honest, I'm not really sure what's happening with all the Aurelia decks. I still think that this deck is kind of broken. I think it maybe just has see if this website's back up yet. Nope. Okay. Now we're at a 502 get bad gateway instead of 504. Nice. Yeah, apparently Aurelia just has a bad Master Yi matchup, which is kind of hard to overcome. I don't know what the specific tech would be in order to fix that matchup. I know Goobum's had um, some kind of cool tech he showed me because I gave him a warm-up game before the tournament started. It's probably up here at the top right. So I don't know how many Yis he actually played. So he beat one Yi. Oh, looks like I only played against one Yi. So yeah, so maybe that's part of it. But what did Phil end up playing against? Phil beat a Yi, but it was in round two. Two Yis, three Yis, 2-0'd a couple of them. So, yeah, I guess he just ended up losing. He got 2-0'd by a Kaisa. Oh, I'm gonna have to give him some shit for that one. That's crazy. Um, the Year Apprentice could probably be the 5 Cox Vex and be fine. The issue when you're making like a fundamental swap like that is that while they have similar effects, they play very differently. Part of the reason why you would want like an Ear Apprentice instead of a Vex is that our top end looks a little bit too steep, right? So finding a proper curve so that you don't find yourself in a situation where your hand is just full of like Hueys and Kazakhs and Vexes and then purple Vexes and like none of these cards are playable is never what you want. You want to like try and diversify your curve a little bit more, just in card games in general. So if you're just looking for that effect with, and we're playing like 3 Vex Apathetics, a Kazakhs, and a Huey, and we're committed to that bit, then yeah, I would definitely be on the side of Eager Apprentice. But for whatever reason, Vex Apathetic was less viable into the metagame, then you could start considering playing the other Vex. Do you upload a list anywhere? Maybe? You might have it in our Discord somewhere. If not, you can always ping him to ask what his list was. Do you ever take a look at the deck with Fiora, Victorious, and Blighted Battle Axe? That sounds pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie. Wait. Victorious is the. Oh wait, is it like a Vi deck? Wait, maybe Victorious is the other one I'm thinking of. Oh, okay, this one. I see. Yeah, that's probably not bad. There's a few different ways you can do it with the Blighted Battle Axe, right? For some reason, I was thinking of Peerless as the Fiora, and I was like, what are we playing this at a Lucian? But yeah, Victorious is my girl that I've been playing in Step forever. And just getting her as like a 9 might unit that just ganks between both battlefields isn't terrible. That is a strategy that's worked for a lot of people. So if you're in that color combination, that was one of the things that I recommend to one of my subs who almost got there for the best of Vi. But basically just using the battle axe plus like you can use like Jin plus Fiora plus Rengar. You have like a million 4 drops. That just inherently have ganking, and it's just like I have an 8 might unit that's going to gank between both battlefields. What are you going to do about it? That's Kaisa's your buddy. Oh, nice. That guy's the goat. Phil's a very good player. He won the best of Aurelia in Vegas, so beating him is definitely a big accomplishment. So. Is there a specific card you think is underrated such not unlocked yet due to limitations? I'm not really sure if there's anything I would consider like that. Yeah, there's nothing I can think of. I mean, there's probably going to be some things that will like combo in the future. We already have the theoretical infinite that is going to exist with the is it a sneaky, a shady? I don't know. The Renata plus I, using this Renata plus the I plus the is it like a dockside? I don't remember what this card's called. No. No, it's a purple card from set one. Here we go. Stealthy Pursuer. Yeah, this guy. So these are like all cards that theoretically have will be unlocked now that we're in set four. I don't know how strong this infinite will be, all things considered, but it is something that we got to keep in mind and test with, right? What do you think Aurelia needs to compete? I mean, I think she's competing just fine, to be honest. She's just a little bit off, but you know, it's just like a bad matchup spread at the end of the day. She has a little bit of consistency issues, but like she's still like a top five deck, so it's really tough to be like, what does she need to compete when we have decks that are like we had Darius, we have Rek'Sai, we have Victor that are randomly topping, you know? It's just in this game you're gonna have some bad matchups that happen and have to be able to consistently run through an event. And one thing I've mentioned about the Aurelia deck is that she's just built in such a way that you need the right answers at the right time. You need your not so fast for their rebukes. You need your defies for their star-crossed, etc., etc. And while most of the time you'll be mathematically advantaged to have that happen for you, you won't always have that be a thing for you, right? So yeah, sometimes you'll just get unlucky and not have it at the right time, um, because the deck is so reactive and not proactive enough. When you're proactive, you need to have less of these sorts of reactionary things, right? But the Aurelia deck is so defensive because her deck doesn't really get online until later because you're using cards like Silicon Herder plus the Aurelia and stuff, in order to make the game plan happen. So I still think this deck's broken, but yeah, definitely one that can just struggle sometimes through an entire tournament run, 13 rounds. I mean, and again, Gibbons had a topping record, so like he just got unlucky that he got ninth on the same topping record as everyone else. So it's not like this list is that far off from being able to compete, right? Um, the crazy Gutter Palace deck that got 29th. I can see if it's on. I mean, I saw it posted on Twitter at some point. Let me see if I'm sure somebody's posted on here. I can talk about it. Hartford, yeah, yeah. So I hear about people talk about identifying your win condition, but don't really understand what it means. So how to find or play towards it. Can you explain a little bit? Sure. I mean, I think that's a pretty core concept. So um, yeah, Rift is down right now, so I can't go and look at it easily, unfortunately. So we're waiting until that's back up. Um, but we can use this random deck as like an answer to kind of talk about identifying your win condition, right? So one thing to always keep in mind whenever we're playing these games is like at the end of the day, you need to figure out how you're going to win the game because every deck wins a little bit differently. Obviously, at a core fundamental level, you're scoring to 8 points, but your opponent is also a living, breathing person who is going to prevent you from wanting to win the game, right? They're going to do everything they can to stop you. So you need to have a good answer at pretty much every break point in order to know how you're going to win the game. And it's important that you identify your win condition so that you know what you're playing towards, right? Because every deck's going to be a little bit different. Obviously, this is like an infinite combo. That's win condition is based off of Gutter Palace plus Time Warp. Um, I don't think it. Well, I don't think this is. Maybe this is the infinite version where you're like commenting an echo or something like that. And I've been told that there's some way to go infinite in Jin. I don't know if this is the variation that's doing it because it's playing Hextech Anomaly too, which is obviously not particularly good for going infinite. But I think this deck has to. It's basically just trying to get to a point where it's setting up the Gutter Palace plus Time Warp plus Keeper of Masks after I guess it draws its entire deck. So yeah, very interesting. But So when you're playing that deck, you know what your win condition is. And because I know my win condition is built around the idea of just winning the game out of nowhere, I know that I don't need to be caring about scoring points early. Like, that just doesn't matter for us. Our point score doesn't matter. And so, yeah, we can play accordingly, right? When we're taking a deck like, we'll just click on random lists, you know, Alan's list here, we know that our win condition is going to be based around riding Hui, right? Hui is going to give us access to everything that we need in terms of clearing battlefields. It's going to be our biggest might unit. It's going to give us access to draw. So everything that we're doing in our deck is cards to support this archetype and this playstyle, right? We're maxing on Ride the Winds because that card is very good with Hui. Maxing on Tide Turners is one of our 2-drops because, again, it works with Hui. We have Traveling Merchant as a way to find us into our Hui. Sack Deck, Stupefy, these are all things that are just going to support our Hui. And because our win condition is entirely built around Hui, that's why we have the cards that we have here to support it. Obviously, you always want access to some additional things as well, so that you're not too all in on one strategy, seeing as, you know, Hui has its counterplay. It can get cold, it can get Falling Starred, so on and so forth. But, you know, this is why it's important that we know what our win condition is, so that when we play the game, that we're playing the game around the idea of our Hui, right? In a deck like E, our win condition is a little bit less clear, but, you know, we know that we're going to be scoring points early and holding very easily thanks to our legend ability, and then it just comes down to the question of how we win in the late game, but typically that's going to be done just based off the fact that we're drawing a bunch of cards while scoring points with Lonely Poros and Scuttle Crabs, including access to, like, Emperor's Dice to revive stuff, and then we have some of our late game bombs, such as Rengar and Ruin Runner. But your win condition in a deck like this will often change just based on what your hand ends up being, right? I talked about one of the games that I played against Prismat where I actually beat him without ever playing a single spell, because that was how my hand ended up being going into my deck. I just ended up like playing a bunch of units and avoiding combat at any specific thoughts or any spot because my draw was extremely unit heavy, so all I could really do was just develop units and pass back, and, you know, I was able to develop enough units. I was just playing Rengars and Kinko Monks and Fioras and Pit Rookies and Fey Folks, obviously my set. And I was playing around that because that was what my hand ended up being. But, you know, if my hand ended up being more around spells and punch first, then I know that my win condition is going to be based on trying to do combat with my opponent and leveraging the fact that I have these powerful spells in order to win the game. And, you know, this Yi deck is very similar, where based on the hand that you have, if your hand is all on charms, then maybe your win condition is just removing all your opponent's units, because my hand facilitates that. I have access to 2 charms. I'm just going to kill the first 2 units they play. I'm going to get very far ahead on points, and that's my win condition. My hand is all based on punch first and disciplines and grim resolves, and I know that my win condition is going to be based on the fact that I have the ability to out combat my opponent because I have access to all these spells, you know. Rengars and such are ways to score additional points, so on and so forth. So, you know, that's what it means to identify your win condition in card games. Yeah. So, is Isolate a good card against Vex Imp? The issue with cards like Isolate is that they don't, it's like another one of them is like Stare Down as like another card that just like doesn't really do anything. As weird as it sounds, when you're playing cards like this, and the reason cards like this are bad is because they only work for like one turn, and if you aren't winning the game off that turn by like sending stuff back to base in this game, then it doesn't actually do anything. They're just going to come back in and you're going to be in the exact same spot next turn. So this game requires you to have a little bit more permanent solution than cards like Isolate and Stare Down, in my opinion. Yeah, I know that there's the Jinfinite that hasn't particularly performed. You know, the Gutter Palace deck is the one that seems to be, I guess, a better combo deck. And then I know, let's see, there was the other Jin deck that went 10-3 in Utrecht. I actually ended up playing it against it in that. Yeah, Jibs. This list also not a Jinfinite. It's just like a traditional control deck, so nothing crazy. But yeah, I don't think the Jinfinite list is particularly good. I think it's a little bit too slow. I talked about Kha'Zix a little bit. I think he's a really good Anti-meta list. Still on Hidden Blade. Yep, my list hasn't changed since Utrecht, so it worked well enough for me. So it was just I got top 4 with it, so I was like, you know what, I'm just not going to change a card. I'll just go submit the same thing and call it a day. And Hidden Blade ended up coming up a couple of times for me and being pretty good. So when set works with my playstyle, what would define my playstyle is just being having a very flexible deck. You know, just talking about win conditions and stuff. I'm able to understand what my win condition is from any different spot, and based on the composition of my hand, my win condition can completely change a million different times. On top of that, it is a deck that really forces my opponent into tough spots because it's something that they aren't familiar with. They're not tested against my specific set list. And also I have access to a bunch of combat tricks between like Call the Glory and Punch First and Challenge and Hidden Blade and Repulse and stuff like that. Rengar is a combat trick, Vi is a combat trick. So it makes it very difficult for my opponent to think about all the different options, and I'm very good at predicting what my opponent is going to be trying to do. So if I can build a deck that is like kind of a whole deck, then I think I have quite the advantage because I can kind of goad my opponent into making plays that they shouldn't otherwise based on the context of my hands. So I think he plays Infinite in the side because he's the red Vi in the side, which needs the Infinite. Okay, I see. I don't know what you would want to go Infinite against. Yeah, it's just the Ginfinite nonsense. Yeah, using the red Vi's and some nonsense with Malzahars and Echoes and yada yada. Yeah, I know you're writing stuff with upstage comedies and popping off in some way, shape, or form with all this sort of stuff. So, I think it's just a little too slow. As you can see, this deck literally doesn't interact with your opponent at all whatsoever. So you just end up dying, and I think the Lux version is going to be a little bit better if you're trying to go Infinite. But yeah, I do think at some point they're going to have to ban this Echo card, just because these Infinites are nonsense. Right now, they're okay because they aren't so good that they're unbeatable, but if they ever get to a point where these decks are able to accelerate by even a single turn, then it's going to be a real problem for the game. So, insights from Rossum's Pike list and your thoughts on it versus Backpack Ezreal. I mean, they play relatively similarly. I think they have some good matchups and they have some bad matchups. So, that's the only issue with a lot of these decks, like Ezreal and Pike in general, is that their matchup spread is going to be tough. So sometimes you're just going to have bad matchups, and those are ones that you just can't really do much about. So it removes a little bit of the agency when you're playing these control decks, just because in Riftbound, when you're trying to play control, you have to kind of target stuff specifically. There's no like generic answers that just kind of work, because we don't have cards like in Magic there's like Doom Blades and stuff that just kill anything. We have like Vengeance, but that card's terrible, right? So yeah, these generic control decks, and there's also not like quite the inevitability that people want out of this game, just because you're always drawing a relevant card. The way the point scores work gives your opponent a ton of potential agency or time to catch up. So yeah, I ended up losing to 2 Master Yis, unfortunately, but was able to beat everything else. So, you know, but if your bad matchup is Master Yi, that's just a tough spot to be in, right? So, thoughts on the Ezreal deck, the top forward. I would love to let you know if Rift decks would possibly work. That would have been awesome. I'm sure I can find it here on Piltover Archives. Let's see what his tournament run looked like. It was Bradykin who ended up. Let's see. So he went 12-1-2. So I see. So he ended up having an unintentional draw with the Rengar, which is interesting, and then an unintentional draw with a Yi, but beat everything else. So was able to beat a couple of Yis here, which is quite good, especially being around 7 and 8. Probably pretty good opponents. Beat the Kazakhs. I'm surprised. I assumed Yi would be one of the harder matchups for this deck. Was able to beat 5 up on Vex. Uh, Obviously, I think this deck's very good into Diana, so yeah, I was able to beat Deval. Unfortunately, my goat is washed. Let's see if I can find the list. Um, yeah, okay. This just looks like super traditional Ezreal control. Nothing crazy. Just run 3 Deadly Flourish, but I guess it's good enough to get it done. So yeah, this is a deck that I've tested a million times. Maybe with a couple of random cards like I guess the Sprite Fountain is pretty cute with Pack of Wonders. Um, Having no 2 drops is a little crazy, but clearly it works for him. This is like a traditional control deck, so um, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this list. Clearly it works to get the job done. The fact that I was able to take down Yi is the crazy part, as many times as he did. So that's what I would have assumed was like a unwinnable matchup. But yeah, clearly was able to make it work. What is PGE's worst matchup? Well, unfortunately, his worst matchup has a terrible Diana matchup. So PGE's worst matchup is probably the Hook LeBlanc list. Has a pretty negative win rate into LeBlanc, but unfortunately, LeBlanc has a bad matchup into Diana. So it's that's a tough spot for sure, to say the least. Um, let's see. Apparently, Aurora decks always have decent shots into them, but then you're playing an Aurora deck. Um, yeah, unfortunately, those two are pretty spread. So I'd probably say maybe Huck LeBlanc's still worth playing anyways. You can maybe outplay some Dianas, but it can be tough. Um, Yeah, Draven's pretty good into Yi as well. If you're looking for something off meta, I could see Draven having a decent shot into it. 50%, 6% Yi matchup, and then 42% to Diana. It's not terrible based on Utrecht, so I think Draven's probably a decent choice for sure. I can't really think of much else that has a good shot into both. Apparently Rek'Sai does okay into Yi, but I don't know if I agree with that. It's probably just a small sample size. Volibear actually does probably have a good matchup into both because Volibear crushes Diana, and then it's an Aurora deck, so your Yi PG matchup is probably not too bad. So unironically, Volibear. Brady says it's fairly even into Yi. Discard their hand, then deal with Camels by Accelerating Watcher. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, if you're just able to discard their entire hand, then that's probably how you get around it. So I would worry about a good Yi player that understands what you're trying to do against them, but especially on the Emperor's Dice game, that seems unwinnable if they're just bouncing a crab over and over again. Thoughts on Peerless and Yi? I do not like that card. I think the card doesn't really do what people want it to. Anything that requires you to play a power early, pay a power early, better do everything. Otherwise, it's not worth playing, and that card does not do everything. Dravenfold server, correct. Yeah, that's the reason. One of the main things that's keeping Draven back from being a top contender deck, in my opinion. That and it just has a really low play rate because people are tired of Draven in general. And apparently has a terrible Azir matchup as well, according to the Utrecht script. But I don't know if that's entirely true. So, what do you think is the issue with Jax? It's just on a fundamental level that what they have designed Jax to do is not particularly good in Riftbound. So when you have these, I don't know, just this strategy that is built around the idea of like equipping one big guy up and making it work. It's kind of like again identifying our win condition. Um, sure, you do. Our win condition is just not very good in this specific deck when this one's okay, a little bit more interesting, but still kind of just like a worse deck. That's going to be where you're at, right? Where either you're like this list, where you're just like kind of a worse E list for whatever reason, or you do the yeah all of like the Aurelia and Stellacorn Herder nonsense with counter strikes and such, but um, you just don't have access to much consistency or draw. We're only on able to play 5/2s that can aggressively score early, which means that we're going to fall behind on points often, and then have to rely on all of our spells and equipment in order for us to have our strategy work, right? So, yeah, the rule change on Jax really did fuck this deck over. So, but what can you do? Um, Yeah, Draven into Aurora is pretty impossible. I mean, you could like try to Star-Crossed Max is really about the only thing you can do into it, but yeah. One of the things that you just have to identify is like if you don't want to play these best decks or whatever, then if you're avoiding like the top three decks or even top four, I think Azir has a pretty even spread across the board, even though I guess it has a bad E matchup according to the Utrecht data. Like you're gonna have the reason why all these decks are bad is because there's some matchup somewhere that they just stand no chance against, right? Like even if you're playing some of the worst decks in the game, Garen here had a 100% silver matchup. So if you're only playing into that, or only playing into Azir, or only playing into Annie, granted the small sample size here is very small, so you know take it with a grain of salt. But in these situations where you're playing one of these quote unquote bad decks, you're playing Vi into Victor, where you have an 80% win rate, then Vi is going to look like the best deck in the world, right? But like if you're playing something that's off meta, then the reason why it's off meta is because it has some sort of bad matchup that is in the meta. If you're playing Jhin, you're gonna have to accept that you have a 100% win rate into Diana, which is even one of like the meta decks, which is probably true. Diana can't do anything into Jhin. You just blow up all their units, and then half their deck doesn't do anything. But you're also gonna have to accept that you have a 6% win rate into Master Yi, right? Like that's just how these things go, and why Jhin is not an off meta deck. You just have like unwinnable matchups into Aurelia and Master Yi. But if all you play against is Diana, and Diana's one of the top decks, then Jin's gonna look amazing. So, yeah, that's where a lot of these things are. Where just like if you want to play something down here in the depths of not top tier, the reason they're not top tier is because they have some sort of bad matchup somewhere. So yeah. Um, It only defends for 10 if they don't have any sort of. They don't send two units into it, is the issue with Peerless. And this is also assuming that they don't have like a removal spell because she's just a base 3. So if it wasn't for the fact that she had to. Like if they can just send two units in and then it does nothing. They can ambush in and it does nothing. So. Um, Now that Ari is rotated out, will be the next most expensive metal card. Um, I think Aurelia is the one that's sold for the most right now. I want to say LeBlanc and Aurelio is close. Same with like Diana. A lot of these waifus are kind of all in the same sort of tier. Um, let's see, Spirit Forge, Unleashed. Obviously, we'll also have set 4/1, so I think I could see Akali being a top dog. Um, yeah, we have Aurelia's gone for a decent amount. I mean, Vi is an iconic character, but I'm of the opinion that this artwork sucks, so I just think her in like the whole cop outfit is not great. So compared to like doing something a little bit more arcane would be nice, right? So and then yeah, we have Diana and LeBlanc both have gone for a decent amount, so probably one of those three, if I have to guess based on current ones. And then there's a possibility that Zed goes for Infinite or Akali goes for Infinite or some of the new legends as well. So, Call Hearing or Flesh and Blood Pro before Riftbound. How would you rank Riftbound skill expression in comparison to Fab? How does it compare to other card games? I think Riftbound is yeah, it's a very skill intensive game. We've seen a lot of this same players being able to consistently top in a lot of these events. So I think that it's just a different style of how the game works. I think Riftbound is extremely punishing, and making a single mistake is something that will lose you the game, and that's something that works on both sides, right? Where If you're a good enough player and playing a good enough deck, then you can capitalize on your opponent's mistakes. But if you're also making little mistakes here or there, then it's going to be a problem. I'm the one who runs the channel call, and it's just kind of everyone. It's myself and Anton who primarily run the channel. So Anton has the majority of the control over the YouTube, though. So whereas I handle a lot more of the Discord and coaching and guide writing and stuff like that. Same with games. Yeah, Camel, you just can't deal with it. Yeah. That's my take. And one of the things with, like, I had some friends who wanted to play this Ezreal deck, and I was like, if you can answer Camel, then great, but Camel's going to be your nightmare in this deck. So, and I guess this Bradykin was able to do it, so shoutouts to him. He found his unique enough way to do it by just being patient with it, making them discard their entire hand, and then kill it afterwards. So, yeah. Volching sucks, but quick draw equip is still broken. Yeah, I mean it's okay. I don't know if I'd say broken. Like at the end of the day, when you're like quick drawing a brutalizer or whatever, it's the same thing as a grim resolve in a lot of situations. Obviously, you get to keep the equipment around, so that's part of the benefit. And then you have access to like Guardian Angel and stuff like that as a way to quick draw equips. But you're in order to have this very slight benefit over some other cards, you're giving up so much in terms of a legend ability. So there's no, while there's certain things that some of these decks do, right, where like the Bewitching Spirit loops is very broken, making your opponent discard their entire hand. You have to look at these decks on a more fundamental level and understand that, like, if they're doing this, it means they're giving up somewhere else, right? And this deck is giving up by just not scoring points early. And that's something that you have to accept playing this deck. Very similar to win conditions, right? There's so many different things in this game that are just like inherently broken. Like Counter-Strike is like one of the most absurd hold cards in the game. It's just like an entire combat just completely fogged. Doesn't matter what you do. You can send 1,000 damage at my unit, and it all just gets pushed back, right? But it has to compensate for everything else that these decks are lacking, and in order for that to be worth it, right? So. When playing his move in 30 seconds to a minute for the Ranger play, take 5 minutes before doing anything. Yeah, that's something that like I hope that they get a little bit better at. I'm not sure if he was just too nice or whatever, but if you're playing a deck like this Ezreal deck, you have to go into the tournament understanding that you're gonna have to be an asshole to people, and in the sense of like, well, I don't even think it's being an asshole, because realistically, if you're letting your opponent take 5 minutes against you for an action, you're letting your opponent cheat you, because it's against the rules to take 5 minutes for a turn. But when you're playing a deck like Ezreal or something that's going to take a very long time to win, right? You need to tell your opponent to hurry up and make a play. Like, you can't let your opponent just sit there and tank for 5 minutes. Like, that's just unacceptable. So, yeah, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people who aren't really willing to go to that level of extreme because they feel bad or whatever, playing your control deck, and your opponent's just having fun with their little cats and stuff, and you're having to tell them to hurry up in order for you to be able to get through the game. But I mean, that's just part of the game. So especially at the competitive level. So when you get the spreadsheet for Utrecht matchups, this is all a part of it's part of our Discord, which is accessible through our Metafy. This is one of our community resources that one of our guys does. So shout out to the Manch. So hopefully we'll have one for Hartford that I think Anton will be able to go over on Wednesday. I know he didn't have the time to be able to make it for us already. So what if the opponent blames you for playing Ezreal? I mean, there's a lot of levels to it too, but realistically, so long as you're playing quickly, I think it's reasonable for you to expect your opponent to do the same, right? So, Huckleblonk feels bad against purple. Yep. I mean, I built the deck, so I know all about Huckleblonk's bad matchups into purple. Unfortunately, it's just one of those spots where like you have to accept that it's going to be a little bit of a problem. Damn. Well, this sucks. I really wanted to go over the deck list a little bit more to see what spicy tech there was and such, but Fortunately, Rift X is down, so I kind of put a wrench in that plan. Don't know which master use which. I can see what the winning list was. I spent 2 minutes to play one unit. I mean, 2 minutes is still a very long time. Realistically, if you're taking more than a minute to perform an action, that's probably kind of a lot. So that's my usual like test. Is I'll be like, all right, if they're like taking a minute to think about their turn and they're performing all the actions in like a sequence, then it's typically fine. But if they're taking like a minute playing a card, taking a minute playing a card, then like that's obviously unacceptable. So. Plus, I'm playing Chinese X cards, but not knowing what they do at the end of turn. I did not know about any of that, so I don't know any of the drama that's to be said. I'm surprised people haven't asked more about the best of card selling for what it did. Got a bigger event coming up and can't pick a deck. Played set 1 and Fiora set 2. I mean, I think that E is like the default broken deck that works very similarly to Fiora and set if you're just looking to play play the best possible cards. Oh wow, okay. So this is why everyone's talking about Peerless, as this guy played it. I still don't particularly think this card's that good, but just on like again, like kind of a fundamental level, just because it's not something that you want to be playing early, but maybe this deck is built in such a way that you don't need to play it early, and that's good enough. So actually probably this is probably his mirror breaker is the specific reason why he's playing this card, because it gives you some odds into the mirror. So that's always one thing that you're looking for whenever you're playing a deck list like this is some way to give you a benefit into the mirror, and I'm guessing that's exclusively why this card is in here. But I can promise you, if it wasn't for the mirror, this card would not be in this deck list. So, no, Prismat has more best ofs than I do. Prismat is the undefeated goat. I think I'm second in terms of best ofs, but Priz has the most. I think 5 is the number that all of us have at the second. Ari best ofs sold for 115K. Let's see. I was gonna look at what his tournament run was. So I'm curious how many Ys he ended up running into. Oh, he lost to Sam Sherman. Interesting. And kind of went out from there. So, beating Nazir, beating Annie, yeah. So he actually had 3 matchups where he actually 2-0'd Ys. So, clearly this list is particularly good into the mirror, which, again, you're always looking for something that, like, if you're playing, like, the broken deck like this, you're looking for something that stands out in the mirror, so. The reason why I've never been a fan of this card previously is just, again, it requires it. It's probably only good in the Yi matchup. I can promise you that this card comes out into anything but Yi, but he wanted to have a good enough matchup, and he assumed that it wasn't a dead enough card into other matchups in order to get through the event, and clearly that was right. So. Oh, it's on attack trigger. When I attack or defend one-on-one, double my might this combat. Okay, I see. So it doesn't get stopped by ambush, which is nice. How do people know this behind the scenes? I know everything. That's the true answer. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We all should have been playing Ari. This is the actual answer. But, it was a gamble, and something that even I considered is I knew that this Ari would sell for a lot. I didn't think it would sell for that much, but I knew it would sell for a lot. But I know that, like, when you're playing a deck like Ari, realistically, what's going to end up happening is it's just based on dumb matchup luck. Obviously, it was the 7th most played deck, despite it being a terrible deck, just because, it's one of those that you just have to have good luck. So he played into, was able to beat like an Annie and Ezreal. Lost to another Annie, beat a Draven, which historically, even in the previous set, Draven was a very good matchup for this deck. And then somehow beating Aurelia. That's crazy. Aurelia was always a terrible matchup for this deck. So, I don't want to get into the specifics of why it did. Just know I can confirm that it did in fact sell for that number. So we'll see if Riftbound's going to become the next One Piece in terms of collector's market. So, um, the Mana Moon deck boxes, yeah, I something about like these flimsy plastic deck boxes just do it for me. That are just like so small and compact and all that. I very much so like them. I don't want them to be too nice, as weird as that sounds. I just like them being kind of kind of flimsy and stuff. Part of part of the appeal for me, especially because I use min rarity decks, so I don't need a big fancy deck box. So it was partially split. Mana Moon takes like 1.5 years to get deck boxes in your hands. Yeah, I know. There are like some really cool deck boxes that are out there, but I just stick with like my Ultimate Guard stuff, or like these flimsy plastic anime deck boxes if I want something a little bit less um, free mini from the Parakeet plus Super Side. Yep, exactly. I think that Riftbound's in a really good spot for people to just kind of show up, and so long as you get a metal card or two, you can typically pay for the trip. So, especially if you're like splitting a room and not having a terrible travel time. So, um, for if you're a peerless work like Purple Ka, ability checks for the 1v1 when it goes on the chain or on resolution. Correct. Yeah, it works the exact same thing as Ka. So if they like ambush in later, then you still have the doubled might. It just checks as soon as it goes in, so then it'll resolve and so on and so forth. But yeah, for the very first Riftbound event, you thought best ofs were gonna be 1 to 2K. Yeah, the regular medals are 1 to 2K. So yeah, good luck on that one. Yeah, I appreciate it, Shub. I'm glad that the deck list worked for you. I don't really know if there's anything that I would want to change for it. Technically, there are like 2 or 3 more events I might play set at, being the unofficial events between Charlie's. There's one in like Pittsburgh, I think, and then obviously the Dallas PPG. So I'll probably play set for those if I just show up and just at least get my free medals. But I don't know if there's too much that I would change. There's you like in theory could sub out some arena bars and hidden blades and such. And like Kinko Initiate's the one card I was considering if I wanted to play more Vias and just have some extra bodies around. Then there's a possibility of playing that card. But overall, I didn't particularly like it just because it doesn't really do anything towards my win condition, which is usually just like riding one big guy the entire game with buffs. So yeah. I think people play Legends or from Origins to the next RQ. Somebody will play Legends from Origins for the next RQ. How many is to be determined, and I think that's just relative to how broken the decks are, right? Like, I think if Master Yi PG is as broken as it currently is, then we'll still see people playing that deck. If it's still boasting a 60% win rate across the board, like people would be crazy to not play it if they're looking specifically for their invites. For players like myself who already have 5 or 6 invites, then you know, I play tournaments a little bit differently than everyone else does because I don't need an invite or anything like that. I'm just trying to get as much value as I can out of like best ofs and such. So um yeah, the Hidden Blade comes out in a lot of matchups, so it's like not the worst card in the world, and it is just like a universal catch up, so catch all. So I get to play games a little bit differently, but even then, against a lot of the decks that you wanted, it can just get defied anyways. So it's definitely one of the weaker cards in the list for sure. What are my thoughts on mid-range LeBlanc? I played against one in the tournament, and it did not particularly impress me. I just don't think it does enough to help in the bad matchups. So, in theory, like playing singularities and such could potentially help into Diana, which is like our worst matchup. Um, but I don't know if it helps enough that once you like have to start cutting all the hook nonsense for cards like Singularity, you're falling so far behind in every other matchup just to make your matchup into Diana a little bit better. You're like removing your advantaged Master Yi Proving Ground matchup. You're removing your advantage Aurelia matchup. Um, you're removing your advantage Sivir matchup. Removing your advantage as your matchup just to fix like the Diana matchup. I don't think that's necessarily worth it. Potentially, you could like sideboard into that variation into Diana to maybe make it a little bit more palatable. But I will always be of the opinion that Hook LeBlanc is the only way to play her. Regular metal RA is like 45k. Yeah, it's still pretty good though. Surprised at the 10k after in Houston. Yeah, that was the first set of them. So, um, but yeah. Do you think what's gonna be my next best of chase? No idea. We'll see. Maybe a set 3 legend or set 4 legend, or I'll probably spend like one tournament or something that I'll just play like what I think the best deck is just to see if I can do it. Yeah, it was Jeff Jones who got the loose end from Houston. How good is Safety Inspector into purple? I mean, I know it's a purple card, but I don't think it particularly does that much. You're spending a bunch of EXP. The only time that you want Safety Inspectors if you're playing Kazakhs and oh wait, oh this one. What am I thinking of? Oh, the Investigator. Um, yeah, this card's like fine. I've seen some people taking this in Huck LeBlanc as some sort of way to maybe do something into like the Diana decks, but again, it's still like I don't know. I feel it all feels so cope to me. Sometimes you just have to accept that like there's just bad matchups that you're probably not going to win. Oh, holy hell, we're back. Okay. Nice, nice, nice. Um, I don't know how much actual info that we have here, but we can go through it a little bit, and then I'll answer a few more questions and then call it, just because I am super tired today. But yeah, Goobums, yeah, he had higher percentage than Duval did as well, actually going into the last round. Um, and but yeah, it just ended up being like by like it was only like 0.5% higher, and then because Goobums got the pair down into an X2, um, I think that's what caused it so that Duval just ended up having a slightly higher win condition or win percentage. So yeah. What do you think about Kazakhs at end of the set? Seems like some matchups are impossible. Yeah, I mean, I've spoke about that, but that's the only reason that Kazakhs isn't like S tier because it actually has a decent matchup into all the best decks. It just has some bad matchups, but every deck does. There's no deck that just has no bad matchups at all. Jeff Jones sold his Lee Sin for 25, 29. That's crazy. I gotta start charging more for my sets. I do not know anything about a LeBlanc list with Echo. You could, I mean, it doesn't sound terrible, I suppose, if you're trying to as get like around the Diana nonsense, then maybe that's a way to do it, but I don't know if it would work. Who came up with the new variation of the Lux Infinite that Trevor played? He said that he worked together with some of the people from Utrecht, because he ended up having a chop for the Lux from Utrecht with the other Luxes that were there. And this was the list that they came up with, where he just found that the Time Warps plus Seals made comboing off a little bit more consistent into the majority of matchups. So, yeah, this is the list that he ended up settling on, and obviously it worked out pretty well for him. I don't even remember what Trevor ended up losing to. Obviously, he lost to the Diana and top 8, just because, like, hard bargains a bitch. Oh yeah, he lost to the aggro Diana and Swiss. That was one of the things that he mentioned, where it was just like sprite fountains and such. So, do you think the Leak Driven is good? No, that card is not good. How do you navigate bad matchups? 40% win rate or less. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever matchup you're running into, you just have to identify your win condition and then just go for it. For LeBlanc and the Diana, your win condition is if you're ever able to duplicate a unit and like hook it, you win the game on the spot. Because Diana's deck isn't built enough to be able to answer like all the additional value that you're gonna get out of it, right? So even when it is like a bad matchup for the most part, you still always have a win condition. Sometimes that win condition is your opponent doesn't draw their Starcross or their Gust or whatever. But if you're at least playing to put yourself in a position where you're forcing them to play as many Starcross as possible or as many Gusts as possible, then you can put yourself in a potentially winning scenario. Whereas otherwise, if you're playing and you're just like, oh well, it's a bad matchup, I'm just gonna concede and I'll just not even play for it. You just have to identify like why it's a bad matchup. You know, why LeBlanc is bad to Diana. Well, they have a bunch of Starcross, and we don't necessarily have an answer for that. Once they play like 4 Starcross off their Fizz, we're probably toast, right? So, well, what's my answer? Well, now I understand that, so I'm just gonna have to try and run them out of as many Starcross as possible. And if they only draw 1 Starcross, then maybe I can play through the game and win from that spot, right? Um, so yeah, there are obviously some unwinnable matchups that exist in this game. Apparently, Renata into Diana is 0%. So those are some of those things that exist. Or Jin into Master Yi is 1 6% or whatever. Those are the matchups that you just like accept that you just lose. But that only typically happens when you're playing one of these bad decks. So long as you're playing a decent deck, then you're never going to be completely 0%, right? So. Um, yeah. Thanks for the prime sub, Kobe. As a pro player, what percentage of your income stream relies on tourney winnings versus coaching content/guides? It's hard to say. There's so many different ways that. I mean, I buy cards. I do all the coaching, doing all the streaming. So it's really hard to say. But um, the only thing I can say is that I would do okay even if I did not perform well in tournaments. So that's an Akali legend. I'm holding reservations on any of the leaked stuff until official spoilers come out for a lot of this stuff, just because um, there's no context for any of the set 4 cards until we see everything in the set 4, right? I'm of the opinion that like there's no reason to test anything until like all the new cards out, because while I could make like an Akali list right now, just going with the cards that are now, it guaranteed would not look like that going into set 4, because we don't even have her signature spell, which will almost assuredly be played in the deck, right? So you know, certain cards will not end up making the cut and such. So I do think that she looks pretty cool and is something I'm looking forward to playing. But yeah. Let's see. Are there any other cool deck lists that I wanted to go over? I don't know if there's anything extremely worth covering. Yeah, I covered most of this for the most part. Yeah, obviously the Rengar deck hasn't really changed at all. It's just going to be the same thing as Sam's OG list. Just a default aggressive list. Here's Rossum's list for whoever was asking about it earlier. Just a little bit more of a controlling pike list. Looping your bewitching spirits and such. So, whereas Duvall's list was a lot more mid-rangey. Yeah, Jin farms Diana. Diana can't beat Kaisa or Jin. I've used challenge on the unit, but the unit I'm challenging with gets Starcrossed. What's the result? My unit's being targeted with the Starcrossed here, so does challenge just fizzle? Yes. Challenge just fizzles. It's part of the reason why I have to be careful into the matchup, and while challenge is my best card into Diana, just because it kills the way, I can only ever do it if they don't leave enough energy up, so. Do you know when they'll start releasing set 4 info? They officially said that it's like, I think sometime after maybe July 6th or something like that. There's like a 2-week spoiler season, I think from July 6th to the 17th, where all the cards will be spoiled, so. But yeah, obviously this listed very well for Rossum, so not a bad list at all if you're looking to play something a little bit more controlling. He was able to go 10-2-1, so quite good. Would you run 3 Vex Epithetics and 3 Hueys, or you lean more towards the aggro route? Man, that's just a personal preference. I mentioned it before, but like the aggro version that he's playing is going to be much better into the slower decks. It's probably better into like the mirror match, because you can apply good pressure no matter what. It's going to be better into like your Auroras, so on and so forth, but it's probably going to be worse into your Master Yi matchup, since that deck is very grindy, so. But yeah, so I think overall it was a good tournament. Congrats to Factor, ended up actually taking the win. Sad that Trevor wasn't able to take the win. It was just a little bit too this deck is like very much so just kind of what your matchups end up being. And if you play into one that has enough defies and hard bargains, it's really tough. Actually, this list was built to be it's much better into defy, which is the reason why he went with the time warps and stuff. But it's much worse into hard bargain rather than our official list. So that was just the meta call that he chose, and obviously it still worked out for him. Being able to make top 8 on Lux is crazy. So, but yeah, I'll answer a few more questions and then probably end up calling it an early night since I did just get back from Hartford myself. So I'm probably gonna pass out super early tonight. Are there any plans to stream online testing sessions? I'm going through Sam Sherman's testing VODs, and they're really fun to watch. It's something that we've done previously, and it's something we're planning on doing a little bit more in our Discord as well. Once we get to set 4. The only reason we haven't really done too much of our playtesting streaming is that we haven't had like a ton of playtesting, just because we typically figure the format out pretty quickly and kind of go from there. So once set 4 comes around, I expect us to do a lot more playtesting sessions, either privately through our Discord or maybe the occasional stream that we'll do here on YouTube as well, slash videos, etc. But that'll definitely be once set 4 comes out sort of thing. Right now, the meta is pretty much solved. We understand where everything is at right now. Even some of like the unknowns, like this Ezreal list that topped, like we knew about this list. This is a list that we've had plenty of times. It was just something that we felt struggled a little bit too much into Yi, and that was part of the reason why we weren't interested in playing it. If you're playing against Yi, that at least knows what they're doing and is camo maxing. So, new to the game, but trying to master Kha'Zix, but I find it kind of hard to close games, especially when ahead. So when you're ahead in Riftbound, one of the things that you want to do is avoid taking risks. Is a big thing that I try to tell everyone. So if you're already ahead on points, then avoid doing combat as much as possible. Just score your points, especially playing Kha'Zix, because you're able to retreat your units out. Just if you're ahead on points, just keep everything in base and keep doing that. Where people really tend to falter, I think, is when they're ahead on points and then they do unnecessary combats, just because I'm ahead on points, which means that I'm ahead on tempo, and then I can just do random combats. And then as soon as you lose the combats and you lose all your units, then you're typically going to lose the game. So yeah, Kha'Zix I think is one of the most annoying decks in the game to play from behind against, just for that very very reason that they can just like constantly retreat their units out. So yeah. For the aggro Diana list, do you think it'd be okay to replace one of the Vexes for an extra Moonfall in the main deck? Let's see. We don't have his sideboard. Interesting. I mean, I guess you could. I'm sure. I don't know what his sideboard is because we don't have it, but I'm assuming a lot of these cards that we just don't have the extra copies of are just ones that we have extra copies of in the board. Is typically how these decks end up working. So realistically, if the card is in your 48 anyways, then you can always orient your deck in any sort of way that you want. You could move like the Vex Apathetics to the board and then play the third Moonfall if you think that your specific metagame is in a position where you're going to want more Moonfalls than your Vex Apathetics, right? So when it comes to a deck list, what's within the 48 and how you choose to specifically orient your deck is, entirely up to you. The only reason that the cards are in the sideboard instead of the main is that you expect to see more of the matchups where you want the main deck Vex Apathetic than you do the Moonfalls. And I'm assuming that one of those matchups is Yi, so that you can avoid getting Renguard, whereas Moonfall just gets defied most of the time anyways. So being too reliant on a card like this is not something that you really want to be doing. What deck am I planning to play? No idea. I will definitely be announcing it. Follow me on Twitter and such. I'll definitely be announcing what legend I will be playing ahead of time, so that people can know and they don't have to contest me if they don't want to. Talk about the Ez list. I think I talked about it for the most part. It's not too much to say. It's just a hard control deck that's going to struggle into, I think specifically Master Yi is the only matchup that I would expect for Ezreal to really struggle. Yeah, as we can see, this is the list from Utrecht. You're looking at a pretty bad Master Yi, pretty bad Victor matchup as well. Just these decks that well either have access to Camel or access to infinite tokens. Like you're just not gonna be able to keep up. Rengar as well is a deck that's just going to run you over. So, these lists are situationally good, but it's very matchup dependent. So there are a lot of these matchups that are just like going to be completely unlosable for Aurelia also probably pretty tough. Yeah. Diana's always going to be pretty advantaged for you as an Ezreal player. Apparently Azir and Kha'Zix is a 100% matchup, which I probably believe. So that's my take on it, and why a lot of our players weren't particularly interested in playing this list, despite us having a very similar list internally in testing, is just that it's very up to specific matchups, and I think Bradykin's a solid enough player that he was able to play through some of those bad matchups. So um, definitely shout out to him, as I think he ended up. Let's see. He played through quite a few Yis before I'm going to get to a defector, though. Eventually, he ran into a Yi that knew what was going on, but whereas the other Yis he ended up playing were much earlier. So, granted, this was still at 6-0 and 7-0, so I'm sure these Yis were good. Just maybe they didn't draw what they needed to. So, is Master Yi a good deck for beginners? Yeah, I think Master Yi is like the deck I would recommend for anyone beginning the game just trying to get into it. It's just the default most powerful deck. It's doing a very broken thing, and it plays very simply. So I think it'll help teach people the game as well, because you're doing a bunch of combat. It's not inherently doing anything like Giga broken, but it's just doing the most fair thing possible unfairly. So yeah. How do I deal with Azir? If you look at my match history, I don't. Azir is like the deck I've lost the most to by far. So, Azir just always has inevitability with like the Sig spell and stuff. So, you just got to kill him before they get to that point. So, with Ezreal, Azir doesn't draw cards, so you just loop their hands with Bewitching Spirit, and then eventually clear their board. They like top deck a arise on you after you empty their hand, then you might be cooked, but you have access to the Bellows Breath to eventually clear their entire board, and then you just spend all the time you can looping their hand with Bewitching Spirit, and then just leave them on off the top of their deck. So Sample seems way low on Victor matchup, but he's just good matchup. Yeah, it's just more of an example. It's not like a specific I don't even know if he ended up playing in this event. So, it's just an example that this Ezreal deck is going to have bad matchups. You're going to play against like a random dude who has Baron Nashor in their list, and you're not going to have an answer to stuff like that. So, it's just some of those matchups end up being low agency. I think overall it is a high agency deck just because you are having to make a ton of decisions. But yeah, it's there's just some matchups that you'll sit across the table and just be like, well, I'm never winning this. I think Pike control is better than Ezreal control. I think they're very similar. I don't think there's much of a difference either way. I think Ezreal's maybe a little bit more consistent. I know that Rossum is just a big fan of Pike in general, so that's why he specifically went for that. But yeah, these lists are almost practically identical, so in a lot of ways. So I just say play whichever you think is your favorite if you want to play one of these nonsense control decks. Maybe Ezreal's slightly more powerful, but yeah, overall it's fine. So okay, I'll go for a couple more questions before calling it a night. The 10th place Aurelia list was playing Find Your Center. There was a list once upon a time that originally was playing a bunch of Find Your Centers, but let me see. 10th place Caravaggio. Yeah, Mouse, no idea. Originally, Find Your Center was in a list so that you could play some of like the more expensive cards. I guess Mind Splitter is a part of it, but it is something where this deck is traditionally a little bit hemorrhaged on power and such. So just being able to spend some time early, maybe playing a Find Your Center in order to get the additional runes is quite helpful. Aurelia typically finds herself in a weird spot where if the game ends quickly enough, like you're going to draw infinite cards off of Stellacorn, but you're not going to have enough runes to play all the infinite cards that you have access to. So, if you get to the point where you just have a bunch of Find Your Centers in your hand and your opponent's at 5, you just play them all for 1, you get a bunch of ramp, then you're actually going to be set up for the rest of the game to be able to hold a lot easier. So, that's one of the particular reasons. The other reason, I mean, I had a list originally that was even playing Baron out of this list with Find Your Center as like a potential way to alternate win condition, but yeah. I'm not entirely sure. My recommendation is always if it's something that you think is interesting, you can always try it for yourself and see if it works out. But yeah, appreciated everyone's support, and it was really nice meeting everybody who ended up stopping by and saying hi, taking photos, signing cards and stuff. I always greatly appreciate meeting the fans and such. So um, so do you like the second place Utrecht list? Is that you would build Draven yourself? You played him? Yes, I think I not that exact list. Probably I probably had changed a couple cards, but that's like the core concept that I would take as a list very similar to that list, and then kind of adjust it from there. What are my thoughts on the Chinese meta compared to the Western meta? You guys ever consider the list when researching and testing? It's something that we used originally when we weren't simul released. Now that we're simul released with China, I don't know how much I'll be looking at it. From my understanding, their gameplay over there is very different from ours. I don't know exactly how much is true, just what I've been hearing. They play very differently in terms of like how their slow play situations work, where it's I've been told that like if you play a deck that they don't particularly like, such as Aurora, then they'll just rope you every single turn and take max time in order to try and win through slow play and stuff like that, which is why we've seen Aurora traditionally not perform super well over there. I think it's the same reason for Miracle Draven. They just were not a fan of playing against that deck, so they would just take infinite time and cause things to be very difficult for any of those styles of decks to play, which is obviously something that we can't do over here in the US due to us having different rules. So while it's something I'll always look at and take with some level of consideration, it's also something I take with a grain of salt because when you have a situation like that where people don't want to play specific decks, it creates like a completely different metagame spread because you're going to see much less of some of these specific decks just based on what their meta is, right? So when you have a deck that is in favor 45% of the time, but okay everywhere else, would you main board cards to raise up 45%, then reduce other decks percentages? If it's 45%, probably not. And you just always want to give yourself the best odds of doing well in a tournament, right? And if it's often times when I find myself in these positions where I have like 1 or 2 bad matchups, I'll just hope that when I play into them, they're bad enough players that I can outplay them anyways, or that I just don't play into them at all, right? But when you just have bad matchups like that, you just kind of have to accept it. I will say that in Riftbound, it is very difficult to win a match when you lose game 1 because it guarantees your opponent is able to. They just have to win the going first game on their going first battlefield. So I am always trying to maximize my odds of winning the game 1 as much as possible. But yeah, it's just sometimes one of those things that you just have to accept. If you're only getting like 5% into your one bad matchup and then you're losing 5% into the 39 other matchups that exist, that's not something that you really want to be doing, right? So yeah. 9 energy pack of wonders bouncing or playing Mind Splitter every turn is so annoying. Yeah, I mean they can do the same thing with. They don't even have to do it with Mind Splitter anymore. They just do it with the spirits. So, um, but cool. Answer maybe 1 or 2 more questions if we have any. Similarly, let's play Traveling Merchant plus roster for game 1 on Zon. Yeah, I mean there's always people trying a bunch of random stuff. So I think Riftbound's a cool game where if you have something that you particularly like and you think is going well for you as a player, then it plays to your play styles. Then obviously as somebody who's done well on a off meta deck that isn't particularly good, I just found something that suits my play style and I went for it. So it's something I always recommend to people as well. And hopefully I'll be able to continue doing that moving forward into set 4. So yeah. But yeah, literally Hearthstone type roping. Someone was saying that they even have an app that like keeps track of time in order to tell people that like this is the max amount of time that you can take for a turn. I don't know how much truth there is behind that. I do know that they have like apps that facilitate their game a lot more than we do, and a lot of it's a lot more organized through applications, which is why like even me as a pro player in North America, that Riot helps out a lot. They could not get me into a China event if they wanted, just due to the fact that their system is entirely based on lotto over there, right? So you have to go over there, you have to play in locals in order to get entered into the lotto, and then due to their gambling laws in China, they can't give somebody an unfair advantage and give them a ticket, no matter what, just in order to keep the lottery system fair and stuff. So just get a chess clock. I mean, from my understanding, that's basically what they do, just on their phone. But um, yeah. But yeah, that's just how it goes. So cool. Um, I'll on that note, I'll call it a day. Like I said, Antim will be streaming on Wednesday for everybody while I'm moving back home, and then you will see a lot more of me after that, I'm sure. I appreciate everyone coming out and all this support for being the five time set best of winner is honestly incredible, and I can't wait until Set 4 comes out and there's some new legend I get to have a complete monopoly on. So in the meantime, if anyone ever needs anything, I'm always responding on Discord or through our Discord and stuff. So you can feel free to reach out to me there. But until then, thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll see everyone once I move back home and start streaming again.